respond to the debate via video link as well. So the Financial Secretary to the Treasury, Jesse Norman.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And let me congratulate the Honourable Member for Midlothian for securing this debate, for his contribution and for his tenacity and commitment in persisting with the debate on Burns Night, where I'm sure he has plenty of other distractions. And may I also thank the Honourable Member for Brighton Pavilion for her contribution. Let me start by assuring colleagues across the House that I absolutely recognise the difficulties faced by their constituents across the country for MPs of every political party who are company directors. However, as colleagues will no doubt be aware, this is not a simple matter to resolve for reasons that I will outline. More widely, I think colleagues will be well aware of the support that the government has provided to individuals and businesses throughout the pandemic and the guiding principles behind how that money has been distributed. At every stage of the crisis, we have sought to support as many people and businesses as we can, as rapidly as possible. To that end, we have provided a wide-ranging package of financial support worth some £280 billion. Its measures include notably the furlough scheme, which has protected the jobs of almost 10 million workers, while the self-employment income support scheme has so far provided grants to almost 3 million people. And let me, if I may, remind the House that those ineligible for assistance from one scheme may still be able to receive help from one of the many other sources of support that are in place. Businesses may be eligible for loans and cash grants, along with tax cuts and deferrals for firms in sectors that have been hardest hit by the pandemic. And we are also providing extra help to the families and individuals worst affected by this crisis with a wide-ranging package of welfare measures worth over £7 billion. Now, the furlough and self-employed schemes have been designed with two overriding principles in mind: the need to target support at those who need it most, and the need to safeguard taxpayer funds against fraud, error and abuse. As the Honourable Member for Midlothian has recognised, it is an obligation, it is a duty on the government to keep fraud, error and abuse to a minimum. And that is what we have sought to do. This approach has meant that the vast majority of those who have requested help have been able to obtain it, while the taxpayer has been protected. But it is important to say that the government recognises that some people do not qualify for either support scheme, and this group includes some company directors. Let me turn to the specific situation facing this group. Directors who pay themselves a salary through a PAYE scheme are eligible for the coronavirus job retention scheme, that is for the furlough scheme. But as members will be aware, and as the Honourable Member for Midlothian has acknowledged, many directors pay themselves in large part through dividends while taking a small salary. Directors can claim from the furlough scheme on their salary, but dividends are not covered on this scheme, nor by the self-employment income support scheme. And this has become income from dividends is a return on investment in the company rather than wages. And under HMRC's current reporting mechanism, that is the mechanisms that they inherited from many years before this pandemic crisis struck us, those reporting mechanisms, which have been designed to meet the needs of a tax system operating in normal times, under those systems, it is not possible to distinguish between dividends derived from an individual's own company and dividends from other sources. Now, according to some external estimates, there are just over 700,000 active company directors. So if HMRC were to provide financial support to the 3.3 million people who typically declare dividend income on their tax returns, more than 3/4 of those grants could potentially go to unintended recipients. This would be an irresponsible and unfair use of taxpayer money. By the same token, to seek to identify directors by means of proxies and assumptions would be an extremely onerous, imperfect, and almost certainly inequitable method. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the government continues to work closely with a range of organisations to explore how these schemes can support directors better. And indeed, others than directors who have found themselves ineligible for the main income support schemes. It is quite wrong to suggest that we have not engaged. Indeed, we welcome any proposal that is constructively seeking to address gaps that may exist in support. But as we consider these options, it is vital that we always bear in mind the need to protect taxpayers from fraud and abuse, which can escalate very rapidly once it is allowed to creep into the system. I and my colleagues in the Treasury have been exploring proposals put forward by some of these organisations throughout the past few months to see if they can provide a viable solution to these different gaps in coverage, and in particular to the issue facing directors. Now, specifically, these, as has been mentioned by both the other honourable members, include the Directors' Income Support Scheme, which has been suggested by the Federation for Small Businesses and others. I am very grateful for the care and thought that has gone into drawing up this proposal. And I would ask the House to recognise that we take it extremely seriously. I have met with its supporters. I have had, and my officials have had detailed conversations about the scheme, and we have sought further information and ideas on critical areas and potential concerns. This is a conversation that has taken a continuing engagement that has taken some weeks. But at this time, I and my officials do not believe that the scheme as framed, and by no means do we rely on the suggestion that it involves dividends intrinsically. We recognise the construction of the scheme and the structure that it represents. Dividends are a means by which directors can be paid, but they are not, as it were, intrinsic to the approach that's being taken in this scheme. My officials do not believe it overcomes the fundamental issues of protecting taxpayers' money and safeguarding it against fraud and abuse. Now, I have raised these concerns with the FSB and the other members of the DIS group, and I and Treasury officials remain ready to engage with them on this issue. In addition, as the honourable members mentioned, my team is currently reviewing the targeted income grant support just received proposed by the Gaps in Support All-Party Parliamentary Group. And as I have said, we do very much remain open to other constructive suggestions. Now, the Honourable Lady for Brighton Pavilion asked the question, what was the case, what was happening in relation to Northern Ireland, and did somehow the government regard the directors of small companies as less trustworthy than others? In answer to the latter question, of course not. We make no judgment about trustworthiness. This is a structural feature of concern about the nature of the support we are seeking to offer and the way in which this particular scheme addresses that concern. And she asked a question about Northern Ireland. I can't comment on that. It is a scheme that's been put forward by Invest Northern Ireland under the Northern Irish Executive. As far as I'm aware, it is not in any way connected to the HMRC scheme, and we look to see how that will work and how they will address needs that may exist and concerns that may arise. But we are not in a position to replicate that scheme in England and Wales for the reasons that I've described. Mr. Deputy Speaker, as this crisis has evolved, we have continued to adapt and refine the targeting of our support so that it can reach more people. Let me reiterate, our guiding principle has been to help as many people and businesses as possible through the pandemic. And we have protected the livelihoods of many millions of people around the country and provided vital support to those who require it most. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. I think actually we've all had to adapt during the COVID pandemic, and it may well be a piece of history tonight that the entirety of a debate has been held in the chamber of the House of Commons where none of the participants were present. Quite incredible. So I'd like to thank the half a dozen people who kept me company during the last half hour, but quite amazing. Happy Burns Night. I suspect there'll be quite a few drams drunk virtually this evening, if not virtually drunk this evening, but nonetheless, happy Burns Night, everybody. The question is that this House do now adjourn. As many as of that opinion say aye. Contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. Order.